Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're going to be looking at cybersecurity incident management for the next 45 minutes, 50 minutes. I left plenty of time for questions. Before I get into the material, I always like to kind of start with the why. Why are we having this discussion right now? Why are we talking cybersecurity incident management? So I really kind of pull this from Simon Sinek, start with the why. This is kind of one of those topics that often gets overlooked when organizations really start building out, say, an incident response program, crisis management program, whatever the case may be. We really focus on technical. We really focus a lot of our attention on digital forensics, for example, or detection and response controls, those kind of very, very technical aspects. We often kind of overlook the operational. And when we start to look at a lot of the training out there, that operational and strategic level decision making that goes on during an incident kind of gets glossed over. So really for the next 45 minutes, I'm going to give an overview of kind of an approach that I've found works and kind of incorporated in myself. I like to say when I'm doing these kind of things, this is a way. It's not necessarily the way. There is no specific way to approach this, but I've kind of put together a construct. We're going to discuss that. And we're going to look at, how do we incorporate at the very end? How do we incorporate this into a training program? How do we work from a training perspective? So we'll be working through that. Before we get into that, let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Gerard Johansen. I am a former incident commander. Right now, I work specifically in crafting cybersecurity solutions, doing everything from tabletop exercises to working with organizations on developing detection and response capabilities. Prior to that, I was in law enforcement for 10 years. And this is really kind of where I got my first taste of understanding crisis management and, that kind of incident management piece. So something that is kind of close to home. Also a published author, got Digital Forensics and Incident Response 3rd edition, published by Pact Publishing. If you're right now going to Amazon, I would hold off because the 4th edition is in progress right now. So, I would hold off on purchasing that if you want. 4th edition should be out early next year. And I am in Rapid City, South Dakota. So going to plug Wild West Hacking Fest. It is my favorite con, not just because I don't have to get on 2 planes and a rental car to get there. It's right up the road from me. So I will be there, as was said. So, if you see me, come up and say hi. If you want to, grab a cup of coffee, I'm always in the mood for coffee. So let's kind of overview. What am I talking about when I talk about incident management and command? We're going to use 2 terms, incident management and incident command, because they really are synonymous with each other. And we really want to kind of look at it from that perspective. We'll look at how this impacts your organization. What can you do? And who are the key people to think about in there? A lot of organizations, this is their incident management process. They are very good from a technical perspective. Oftentimes what I've seen in my experience is organizations will bring in outside digital forensics experts, but oftentimes what they really need is somebody to help them through the process. So when I was with an international team that used to do this, to drop into organizations, one of the key people that we would bring, myself, was an incident commander to work them through this process, because a lot of organizations may have an incident response plan, but they really don't train it, or they haven't really thought about a lot of the incident management fundamentals. So why are we discussing this? As I talked about, this is often overlooked. Honestly, it's more fun to do digital forensics. It's one of those things that's really that aspect of this that's the most fun, the most technical. You can get deep dive into it. A lot of people don't even like training on the operational side of incident management, meaning how do they work through these? For example, run a training exercise and got some feedback from students that during the exercise, like, it seems like all we're doing is moving information around. And I'm like, yep. And then it dawned, oh yeah, that's right. That's what incident management in a lot of ways is incorporating a lot of different information into the overall processes. Attackers are gaining speed. This is one of the others. Initial infection to full impact is now measured in hours. So we need to be very good, not just at the technical, not at the blocking and tackling, but also at the operational and strategic. We got to make decisions faster. And this is very tough for, say, organizations that may not have that built in. So they're running through these things very quickly, and they don't have these preloaded decisions. They don't understand what is going to happen. So we went from a modality, I like to say BR and AR, before ransomware and after ransomware. The after ransomware modality is speed. Speed is a factor. The other thing is, this is not something that a lot of organizations really have a need for full-time incident management. You may have a global, Fortune 50 organization that have crisis managers that are specifically for cyber incidents or general incidents to the organizations. Very few organizations have full incident management, so it's often overlooked. It's often overlooked as a role. You'll find when I've done tabletop exercises, the first question is, who's in charge? And oftentimes it's, well, the CISO. Is the CISO really the person that you need to be making these decisions, or does the CISO need to be working with the executives? Is there somebody in your organization that's specifically trained on that? So brings us to our next point. This is not often trained because it's doesn't rotate as much, doesn't get a lot of the attention when we look at other DFIR topics. Malware analysis. Often new tools are dropping constantly. Host analysis. We're now in cloud. In the last 5 to 10 years, cloud is really just huge in this space. So we're training on that. How do we get to control plane? How do we get to endpoint in there? The big thing that I see, the largest failure point in conducting exercises from Purple Team all the way just to tabletop is coordination between the teams. You get a lot of this finger pointing back and forth. Well, that's identity and access management has to do that. And the identity and access management team turns to the desktop team and says, no, that's their job to do this. We need proper coordination. That kind of stuff cannot happen. Again, going back to that speed. And also there's a lot of processes out there. Most of the processes written, though, if you go back to post 9/11, when the Federal Emergency Management Agency of the United States government, and there's probably one in every country in the world that's responsible for this, they are written more for, hey, pipeline explosion, tornado, typhoon, hurricane, railroad derailment, those kind of things. So a lot of those we can pull and extrapolate some, and we're going to talk about some of those crossover points. But a lot of our existing, going to say the federal government to say, hey, we need crisis management. It's like, well, we've got a good playbook for if your data center gets taken out by a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake, but we really don't have it if it's completely destroyed by a ransomware threat actor. So this is why we're discussing this today and kind of really looking deep diving into some of these processes, these procedures, what I call the 4 Ps, to really kind of get a sense of what this looks like. So what are we talking? What is incident management? If you think about it, it is a holistic approach. It's practices. This is how an organization, hey, addresses, say, key aspects of incident response. All right. What are your practices around digital forensics acquisition? What are your processes around incorporating legal and marketing into your communications? What are your processes? What is the overall approach? The procedures. How do you work through that process? If we think of a process is made up of all of these components, that procedures, how do we go from step to step to step? Who is responsible? Finally, who is responsible for the actions? Good thing to have within your incident management, your incident response, your incident command frameworks is a RACI chart. Who is responsible for what? Again, we're cutting down that cross finger pointing, going, hey, cloud ops takes care of that. DevOps takes care of that. We want to make sure we're very specific through our incident prep. Who does what? As I like to say, who's who in the zoo? Who does what and where? And this is not even just Well, I think that's the DevOps team. It's Dave and Megan that are specifically responsible for taking control during an incident. So we are very specific about what we're doing. So all of these are practices, maybe our workflows and playbooks, the overall process we follow, the procedures within that. How do you contact external parties? Do you have a cyber insurer is another one. So all of this is what incident management is doing for us and providing us that structure. So who's leading this? Who's the one that's in charge of this? Like, let's say it's a zoo. Who's who in the zoo, and who's the zookeeper here? Zookeeper here is the incident commander. This is probably one of the most stressful roles that you can take during an incident. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive maybe, but it is. It is the individual that is responsible for moving the organization through an incident management process. They are there making key decisions. They are there sharing key data points and making sure that everybody understands what the ultimate goal is. So, for example, ransomware, they're driving those key decisions. They're working through that organization. They may not be making the decisions themselves, but they at least know who to go to address these key points that we're going to work through in this process. There's no real ideal role for an IC or incident commander, but have a broad-based security and incident management knowledge. You don't necessarily need to be, say, read up on the latest exploits or the latest vulnerabilities or attack techniques that you need to see. But you should understand if your DFIR team, your digital forensics team comes in and says, hey, we just ran through the domain controller and the ntds.dit file, it looks like it was accessed and exfilled. You don't want to be the one to be, well, what does that mean? What's the impact of that? You should understand that is a grave impact, and you have a lot of credentials that are at risk. The key attribute outside of a technical, and this kind of goes to some of what we talked about in the pre-show banter, is calm, cool, and collected. I like to say that calm is contagious and so is panic. So you want to make sure that whomever you select is not the excitable type. This is somebody that you have to call up at 2 o'clock in the morning and they know what to do. So calm, cool, and collected. Even if you are completely panicking and you're sweating and you're going into this complete state of panic, you got to, on the outside, as they say, you got to look like a duck. Calm on top, paddling like heck underneath. So the IC, this is either a full-time role. So if you see in some of your, if you're looking at, say, your incident response provider, maybe they provide a full-time incident commander that comes in to assist and kind of serves as that orchestrator. Sometimes organizations are so big and they're dealing with these 1 or 2 a month, they may have time for a full incident commander. Most often, though, is to say, hey, you security operations manager, you senior analyst, this is the role that you're going to assume if an incident kicks off. And we'll talk also at the end of how to structure this with multiple incident commanders. So one of the other questions I get is a lot of individuals say, well, I'm a security operations analyst. Why do I need to know incident management? Well, just in case we need you to take over, or you will need to understand, hey, why is the incident commander asking me these things? Why is our process aligned like this? Those are all very useful to know. When I was a rookie police officer years and years and years ago, one of the things that they did for us is everybody, EMTs, fire, other emergency personnel, search and rescue, all went through a baseline of incident command training, of understanding incident management, so that when the incident commander comes and talks to you about something or asks you or tasks you to do something, you're not asking, well, why is this? This doesn't make any sense. It puts that context on there, but you have some understanding of why you're being asked there. one of the things we'll talk about from a communication is everybody is well informed and decisions are made in a timely fashion. We need to break that analysis paralysis, this conversation. I talked about less mature organizations may not have this. And what ends up happening is they're having a 20, 30, 40, 50-minute discussion about what is the best approach for containment while a threat actor is off doing some lateral movement. So even if you're on the red side and you've never experienced the other side of an incident, think about even in your pen test, how 50 minutes of time on a network that you pretty much are owning right now. That is one of the challenges that we need to break up, is a lot of this needs to be addressed. Key thing about the incident commander too is they need to make available all of the necessary resources that the team needs. And we'll talk about some of the other aspects to incident management that are often overlooked. And that's where those resources really come in, as understanding that. So the incident commander is at the focal point of a lot of this. So they're pulling in forensic analysis results. Executives are coming back saying, hey, we need an answer in an hour because we're a US publicly held corporation and we need to notify the SEC. All right. That's those legal and compliance requirements. IT service desk is coming in with, hey, we've got 14, 15 complaints coming in about ransomware notes. They're taking that in. They're understanding, okay, we may have to adjust scope. We may have to adjust our impact. Maybe the opposite, to say, hey, we're only seeing this in a small branch out in Duluth. So we don't necessarily need to panic. We may just have to cut them off and figure that out. They're getting threat intel briefings too during this. Hey, we've seen this type of attack. These are some additional TTPs you may want to look at. They're also feeding out information, okay? Forensic analysis update to the entire team. Hey, our 3D4 analysts, they found threat actor used a PDF that was actually a link file opened PowerShell dumped a secondary payload. They're using PSExec and these compromised credentials to move around. You know, they're coalescing 8 to 12 hours of analysis into a 2 or 3 sentence overview of what they found. They may be talking to regulators. Again, SEC could be Health and Human Services if it's a healthcare institution. It may be state. You know, some people work in healthcare and they have compliance requirements or regulatory requirements that they have to. In that case, they're tasking out what the next things are, whether it's analysis or eradication and recovery. They're also primarily they're giving briefings, executive briefings, keeping the executive committee in the know so that they understand what's going on. So let's look at a situation where you have maybe a Kubernetes issue. You have orchestrated a lot of your web apps and you put them in the cloud, and those web apps are generating revenue for you. You know, the CFO, the CEO are going to have some tough questions. They need to know what's going on. And the incident commander, that's really who's responsible for ensuring that information. And we're going to use a phrase later on when we talk communications called common operational picture. This is one of the key roles of building an understanding of the entire incident from everybody's perspective. So everybody's on the same sheet of music here. So we talked about incident management. This is this overall process with all of the different components that come in. We looked at the incident commander as an individual or a role within the organization. Could be multiple people that take on this when the time is called. Let's talk about a procedure, a process that I've kind of looked at, developed. This is really kind of something that I looked at over the course over the last five years of either leading teams or doing tabletop exercises, is an actual process that organizations can use. So I call it the Incident Command Leading Procedures, or ICLPs, or ICLPs, however you want to put it, ICLPs. This is an incident management process. We're going to tie in various procedures through the entire life cycle of the incident. I didn't pull 8 out of thin air. I actually stole, like most of my stuff that I use for crisis management is based on the U.S. Army's troop leading procedures. The U.S. Army uses a 8-step troop leading procedures. And the reason they do this, the reason that this works this way is scalable based on the organization, the resources that are available. This is such a good framework that you can actually say in the US military context, we're going to have 9 people do something versus 2,000. They use the exact same process. So it flows from one step to the next with discrete inputs and outputs. So one of the things that's often asked is this tied into NIST 61R2? It uses a lot of the terminology, but what I have found is that's a really good construct for understanding how an organization from a macro level moves through this. What I have found is a lot of it doesn't really kind of take into account, hey, what are the inputs, what are the outputs, and what are you doing through that process? It's very high level. I would say, look at SP 861R2 or R3 as it's in draft right now, but look at maybe defining a little bit more concrete, because as you're going to see when we go through these 8 steps, there's a lot of different aspects to it that we address that you might not see in 61R2 or any kind of the higher level incident response type frameworks. So this is the 8 steps. We're going to walk through each one, just kind of give everybody a taste of it so that they can kind of get familiar with it. There is, as was indicated earlier, I am going to be actually working this, the 2-day part of this is we go into a lot of detail on different aspects of this during the actual incident command course. But this should get you started. This is actually something where you can actually start to get started and looking at how to move through these. So as I said, this is a way, not the way. So let's go ahead and just kind of start looking at these 8 steps. So start out with an incident. Security operations find some malicious activity. Mimikatz is run. Believe it or not, I still see Mimikatz. But let's just say we see some post-exploitation activity in the network, and the team needs to get called out. So the SOC is taking up all this information. They're like, hey, let's go through our criteria. This is an incident. No doubt about it. We're moving it up there. So each one of these has kind of a time service level objective, not a service level agreement. What's the difference? The difference is every organization is different. They may have the ability to do this in 8 hours, 6 hours. What this is really kind of a rubric to say, hey, we need to be able to go from the Security Operations Center understands that we've got an issue, publishes a detection or publishes an alert, and it goes to the CSIRT to investigate. That tier 1 to tier 2 handoff should take us less than an hour. Less than an hour is a long time for this part of the process. So you'll see this kind of in the upper right-hand corner, a time hack. That's really what it is. It's kind of a, hey, this is where we need to kind of be to really keep ahead. So as I said, each one of these has a process input and a process output. So the process input is that incident declaration. SOC escalates something into you, into the CSIRT, to the incident commander. The incident commander is going to take all the key details from the security operations. One of the side points to this from an incident management perspective is to have a formalized escalation process, not just, I think I'll send an email. No, it's, we have a Slack bot that every time we have one of these, it goes into a Slack bot. These are the 10, 12, 7 pieces of information that we need to capture, and that gets escalated out. Incident commander is kind of the final one that's going to say, hey, incident escalation is warranted. This is a serious issue. We're going to go ahead and escalate this. The incident commander starts building out as a process output some sort of briefing. Communications are key. And you're going to notice that we do a lot of communication and incident management. As I said, I use the term common operational picture. What that is it's another military term for everybody from, say, a junior analyst, an intern that's helping us out, all the way to the CEO has the same understanding of the incident, the impact, and potentially what the threat actor is doing so that we can make an informed decision across the board. So this is where we start that process, is we receive that escalation. The incident commander is getting a briefing that happens right there and then so that we can actually start briefing the team here. This can be on a PowerPoint. This can be literally in a Slack channel. This could be orally, but capture those key details in a formal statement and start working through that to brief everybody. Then we go into the activate the CSIRTs. We're at step number 2. What we do here is we get on the phone, everybody gets on the horn that we need, and we start that incident briefing. Our goal is we go from that incident escalation to getting the CSIRT team on the phone, on the Zoom channel, in the Slack channel, whatever the communication modality that we're using, get them all together within that first hour. This becomes problematic when that situation comes off at say 2 a.m. or on a Sunday, but our goal is within an hour. So if you're out at Costco with your family and you get that pager duty notification, hey, dial into this room, you may have to pull out your earbuds and start that process. But again, threat actors are moving fast, so this is not something where we can say work through this process after 4 hours. No, we're kind of working through this hour or less. A lot of considerations when you're activating the CSIRT. Again, people have lives. People have all of these other demands on their time. So if you are at least getting it in that first hour, you can identify, well, we've got 2 out of the 5 people on the CSIRT are home. They can dial in. Great. We've got 3 that are out, and it may be 2 or 3 hours for them to get in. Hey, that's fine. We're still making some headway and we're still moving through the process. The incident commander is going to start building that common operational picture, start looking at resources and personnel outside of your CSIRT that may need to be pulled in. If this is a ransomware, it's going to probably be an all hands event. If it's the security operations found a system out in, say you work in something where there's branches or branch offices, a remote office out in Omaha, it's a single system and it's beaconing out. We may not need everybody for that. We may just need somebody to go in there and unplug it. That's really what we're trying to do here. Sources for situational awareness. This is our telemetry. So if you think about our SIM, all of those log files, that's how we're building situational awareness. So what are our tools for that? Again, going back to that example of, hey, there's a branch in Omaha, it seems to be beaconing out to a Cobalt Strike server somewhere in DigitalOcean. Okay, well, let's pull up packet capture just to see what it's doing. Let's see what the logs are for the last 24 hours, 48 hours. Here we start tasking out people. This is very specific. One of the things, and we'll talk a little bit about it in the next stage, is we're very specific about what we're tasking people to do. So that's where we get this initial analysis tasking. We start building this tasking and we start the initial analysis. What is our initial analysis tasking? Well, imagine you are at home and you start a small kitchen fire. Not a big deal. And it gets a little out of hand. You can't take care of it yourself with some baking soda or a non-water fire extinguisher. So you call the fire department. And the fire department gets there and fire chief sits there, fire captain, like, well, I don't know what to do. What should we do here? And we start Well, I really am I'm more of a water person. You know, one of your fire department types say, I'm more of a water person. So I'm going to sit this one out, or I'll wait till we need water on the fire. It doesn't work like that. When the fire department gets there, they know exactly what they need to do. They know exactly what tools they need to apply to this situation. This is where that initial analysis tasking comes in, is we are tasking for specific things. So when I worked in the digital forensic space, and you still see this somewhat, is people have this notion of what artifact they like to look at the most. So if they're looking for process execution, potential process execution, they're like, well, give me the prefetch files, or give me the am cache or the shim cache, or whatever the case may be. This is kind of, and they'll poke around. Nope. With our initial analysis, we are focused on some very specific things, and I'll get into that. So we are acquiring key evidence artifacts, doing a rapid analysis, and our output from that initial analysis are actionable IOCs. We don't need a comprehensive analysis. So let's go back to that time issue. If your analysis approach during an incident is, we just grab disk images, we use FTK Enterprise, or we use Encase Enterprise to just grab a disk image from a system that's infected. The natural question I have is, well, how long does that take? Well, it may take 45 minutes over the wire, or it may take an hour and a half over the wire. I say, okay, well, let's do a head-to-head. You start Encase Enterprise. I'll go down to Starbucks. I'll grab a cup of coffee. I'll come back, and I will fire up Velociraptor, and I will pull a basic triage package. We'll see who gets the data first. So we don't need to do this in terms of what we need to task our individuals is, what are the key artifacts that we need to do to identify these 4 techniques? Initial access, execution, lateral movement, and command and control. That's what we need right now. We don't necessarily need to understand how that threat actor is maintaining persistence, or are they using process ejection or something like that? No, we need to know, what are they doing? We have some code. How are they communicating? How are they moving laterally? So our initial analysis is very targeted, very focused. Again, we're not trying to get a root cause. We're not trying to do a full intrusion analysis. We're just getting actionable IOCs for the next stage. So this is where we focus on tools that will rapidly give us that data. So from a tooling perspective, Velociraptor, there's a lot of people that have done work in Velociraptor right here on this channel probably. Velociraptor is a great tool. Remote collection. You may have an EDR platform. You may have to scale this across multiple systems. Again, we can't wait for drawing this across the network. All right. We need to be able to pivot rapidly and hunt for other associated indicators. All right. It's not a digital forensics class. We're not going to go into too depth here, but what I want everybody to understand is we're being very specific when we're tasking that initial analysis. We're not saying, hey, let's go out and pull a disk image. We may pull a disk image. We may pull a basic triage package through Velociraptor, then get a disk image. But again, we're here only to get those IOCs that we need for leveraging to containment. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to take those actionable IOCs. Our goal within that first 4 hours is to at least identify potentially the command and control lateral movement, maybe execution, sometimes initial access vector, whether that's email, RMMM tool, something of that nature. If you think about how you can leverage, say, a domain or domain names or IP addresses for command and control, or what they're using for, whether it's RDS, PSExec, WMI for lateral movement, think about right now, what can you do to start containing this incident? That is the next stage here. We're taking those actionable IOCs and we're going into a containment. Incident management overall is using this data and your pre-existing containment plans. Every organization should have about 4 to 6 different containment strategies or plans that they've already pre-decided. Very early on, we talked about having that discussion, just understanding, hey, this is the potential impact, gets into this wide-ranging discussion, 30, 40 minutes. But let's say you war game it out and say, hey, what if our K8 API server gets compromised because there's previously unidentified vulnerability? What would be the impact of that? It's a 20, 30-minute conversation. So that if that ever comes up, you just say, we take it offline, we eat the 3 or 4 hours of downtime, we roll to a known good backup, we put some sort of detective preventive control in place beforehand. All right. Here's the other one. What if we have to scramble it? We hit the AZ5 button and we shut off network connectivity because we are in that gray zone where ransomware hasn't been deployed yet. Having that understanding, that way all the incident commander says is, hey, it looks like an AZ5 moment, I'm smashing it, and understanding what the stakeholder potential impact could be. Our process output is understanding containment and whether or not it's worked. Are we seeing a reduction in lateral movement? Have we stopped lateral movement? Have we stopped that communication with known command and control? There's a lot of debate in terms of deploying containment, whether we wait, we kind of get an understanding. It's kind of a before ransomware. Before ransomware, the guidance was, hey, if you deploy containment, they're going to know you're onto them and they may try something else. Yeah, that's true. But if it's a potential ransomware, you want to stop that. You want to limit the damage, because if it's wait for 24 hours and it's 2,000 systems versus 20 systems, there's very little debate there. So, all right, so we got to containment. All right. And containment, I like to say, is the problem isn't solved, but it's not getting worse. So here is at that break point where we start to take a break. Take a breath. We're not going to take the day off. We're taking literally 10, 15 minutes to kind of recompose ourselves and start the tasking again. We're going to go into this and update our analysis tasking. So this is where we're going to update those objectives. So we have new IOCs and TTPs. We may be coordinating some threat intelligence into this soup right here, identify the additional evidence sources, and send them out and to do a secondary analysis. That secondary analysis is the next stage. Here we start to look at compromised systems from a greater width. We may pull memory images to see if there's any process execution or potential vulnerability or exploit. We're going to incorporate any external threat intelligence. What we're trying to do is find potentially the root cause, TTPs and IOCs. That's it. Really what we're looking for. Because again, this feeds into the next stage, which is understanding that secondary analysis, persistence, credential access, exfiltration, and impact into eradication and recovery. So we're taking that data, because here's the thing. And how far you go into that secondary analysis is looking at what your approach is for eradication and recovery. A lot of organizations are a nuke it from orbit type. They're going, all I need to know from my secondary analysis is the date and time of the first known malicious activity, so that I know I can go back to a known good snapshot. Other organizations say, hey, we can't entirely blow up our network. We may have to just clean some systems or make or defang, say, scripts or anything on there, and then go through and clean up afterwards. So that secondary analysis will tell you what hopefully will tell you what the persistence mechanisms are. What are they using for code execution? Are there specific exploits that they're using, so that we can potentially patch, we can roll back to a known good state? This is where you might pull in your business continuity and disaster recovery planning. But what we're doing is we're feeding good data into this stage. One of the mistakes that organizations do is they get through that first initial analysis, they think they have an understanding, and they rush into eradication recovery without working through this process. I've seen it with an organization that had 50,000 endpoints. They had an initial analysis. They're like, oh, it was July 1 at 10 a.m. That's when all of the bad stuff happened. So let's just go back to midnight, July 1, and restore all the systems from there with that snapshot. Did that, went home, all those snapshots hit basically a scheduled task, and boom, executed PowerShell, went right back out to the Cobalt Strike systems, and then got deeper infected in this. So what you need to do is look at having at least those data points to really move into eradication and recovery. The other big part of eradication and recovery is enhanced monitoring. With all of those IOCs, TTPs, threat intel, cut some rules, whether they're Sigma rules, snort rules, suricata on network data. If you've got EDR tools and you have the ability to cut rules, this is where you're going to do this across all systems to make sure you have that enhanced monitoring. The output of this is we are comfortable. We've confirmed that eradication and recovery has been accomplished. We're at the tail end. We close out the incident. So hopefully everybody's been taking notes for the last 3 to 5 days. What are analysis outputs? Collaboration software capture. AI is really handy for this now. Zoom, I think even Teams has an ability to just capture everything and give you a readout of everything that was said, and you can make specific understandings there. This is where we confirm that the incident has concluded. We're going to brief our stakeholders. We're going to start a comprehensive outbrief. There's 2 ways to do this. We have just that closeout meeting at the very end, and then we wait 1 or 2, what I say are 1 or 2 sleep cycles, maybe 2 to 3 days to do a comprehensive outbrief, and then an after action review with the entire team. What comes out of this are some documents, a report potentially, and there is some debate, report, don't write anything down, write everything down, that kind of thing. Or we need a remediation process or process improvement recommendations come out of that. So all things to think about that come into play with this. That closeout is one of the more important aspects of it, because this is where you get those lessons learned. This is where you capture those kind of key details to make sure you don't do this again. This is also a really good time to understand, hey, what within our overall incident management process we need to work on. So here's a diagram, kind of real quick overview, runs through the cycle. As you see, there are some things that cross over with NIST 61R2. There's others that we actually have a little bit different take in terms of what's processing from, say, inputs and outputs and how that moves through there. Communication, we're just going to kind of wrap up our conversation with some communication, some other things, but that common operational picture, this is where constant briefings, a regular cadence of communications, how you handle external communications. United Healthcare, I hate to pick on them, but they had a really kind of a stumble with this, is when people are tweeting out, hey, I can't get my medication because the pharmacy says UNH is down and I can't talk to them. That's not, yeah, your secret's out. You're not going to be able to do anything there. So external comms are critical. So communications throughout is probably one of the most important aspects, other than being cool, calm, and collected, is making sure that everybody knows what's going on and that understanding objectives as you go through it. Health and welfare. The pre-show banter, we did a lot of talking about health and welfare. What can you do during an incident, though? Incidents are stressful. They often kick off at inconvenient times, and they have this propensity to take a while to go through. Even something as, hey, we're going to have to 200 or 300 systems that we have to re-image, it's going to take a while. So have a plan to rotate people out. Here is a good rule of thumb, 12 hours. One of the most highly regulated industries in North America, hopefully everywhere, are truck drivers. They don't allow truck drivers to work any hours they want. They literally have a set amount of time. The reason that we're figuring this out is after about 12 to 16 hours of continuous work, Or if you're up for 24 hours, consider that person drunk, because there is a lot of similarities in terms of decision-making if they have 3 or 4 vodkas and they've been up for 24 hours. So they need rest. Sure, you have a backup incident commander, or you just have incident command. You have 2 incident commanders that just rotate. They work 12 hours on, 12 hours off. Do not power through it. There are studies after studies that are showing, again, sleep deprivation and stress are going to negatively impact decision-making and their ability to execute. All right. So if you've got people that are powering through it, no, wrong answer. We need to rotate some people out. This is where you may say our incident management carries us the first 12 hours. By that point, we should have our incident response retaining organization come in and start taking over this. But again, really, you need to understand this. As an incident commander, one of your goals is to make sure that your people are being taken care of. Employee assistance programs. Employee assistance can help in this. Often organizations don't understand this. Like if you have an EAP at your company, give them a call right now and say, hey, I'm the incident commander for Acme. And sometimes we have to deal with these. What are the best ways we can approach this? Can we even engage somebody? Can we just have a system off in the corner that if they're feeling stressed, you can guide them through maybe some 20, 30-minute breathing exercises, something like that. Hey, leverage that. That's awesome, because that'll help. Here's the other thing. Incident commanders should have resources. That is one of the things they should do. Work with EAP. One of the easiest things you can do for your incident command, incident management and incident commanders is give them some resources to book hotel rooms. That is kind of one of them oft overlooked is if you've got remote people, it's very easy. You point and go, Dave, I don't want to see you on the Zoom for 12 hours unless it's absolutely necessary. You're going to go out, take a walk, go to sleep, get back up, and I'll see you at 8 a.m. If you've got a corporate campus that you've brought an entire team in, a lot of these places, 2 or 3 miles down the road, there's a Marriott Suites, there's a Holiday Inn, whatever the case may be. You may have to plop down the gold card and say, hey, I need a block of rooms. All something to think about. Finally, let's talk about how do we train this? Technical exercises, but most likely where a lot of these processes can be trained is in a standard tabletop exercise. TTXs, tabletop exercises are a necessity. They're not a nice to have. This is where you should be looking at pulling in whatever you want. If you want to take this construct and break it apart and make it 12 steps or 6 steps, however you want to do it, but start to work through realistic scenarios. Start to incorporate some real impact. If we had a complete enterprise-wide ransomware incident, or our domain controllers got popped and we need to do a global password reset, what would that look like? How would we work through that from an eradication and recovery standpoint? How would we even identify that in an analysis? That's the key focus. In terms of incident management, we're really looking at 3 key areas. That technical, this is how your teams go about doing their job. How do my digital forensic analysts or cybersecurity analysts pull evidence from systems? How would they analyze it? What tools are they going to use? How's our network operations going to perform command and control? All of that stuff. The intra team, here's kind of one of the other things to think about. How does that security operations team or that security analyst team of 5 analysts work together? Do they all rush to try to find patient 0? Or are you tasking out specific individuals based on their skill set? You may have somebody that is a hotshot when it comes to memory analysis. They're going to need to know how to just do basic triage, but you may turn them loose on 3 or 4 memory images. You may have somebody that is a network, they came out of network ops into network forensics, and they understand that in and out. They can do things with Wireshark you just didn't know. That person, you say, hey, I'm going to give you some packet captures, I'm going to give you some firewall logs to work through. How do you coordinate that so you're not duplicating efforts? What I've seen is you have 3 or 4 analysts, evidence gets dumped into an S3 bucket, they all rush for it, and it's like, no. You need to have how do you coordinate your efforts to make sure everybody is one sharing IOCs and they're operating and they're all doing some task division so that you're not replicating efforts. And then inner team, how do you coordinate with the larger enterprise? So think about this from a tabletop exercise, how you could start to design this is you could really start to throw in some containment issues, right? Hey, we've got all over the enterprise, what's going on here. You may have to work with your network operations team to address that. Other times you may have to work with desktop, but how do you work in that coordination is all critical, all a critical component of incident management. So when you're looking at, say, a tabletop exercise, you want to look at, hey, how would we broker this conversation? Because again, we're hitting on a key aspect of this is making sure that a lot of these decisions, a lot of these discussions are happening before the incident so that when we get to the incident, we've already had these conversations, we already understand the impact. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. If you want a copy of the slides, they will be shared out. My contact information is in there. But if there are any questions, we can go ahead and address them right now. We have a few minutes. Okay. Yes. Short answer, yes. Leadership is you can be a security operations, say you're a senior analyst, and you're really good, and this goes for managers too. You may identify somebody within your organization that has that, they have that skill set from a basic or advanced security knowledge. They have some project management skills. They're really good on their feet in terms of comms. That may just be a senior analyst that's just there. They may not, but they are going to be your incident commander. And I would actually recommend one of the things a lot of people, I think, it's kind of a mistake. I wouldn't say a mistake. It's an approach that I don't necessarily, it depends on the organization, is a lot of organizations make their CISO the incident commander. I find that kind of difficult. It works really well if they need to make some decisions at the high level, but generally you want the CISO to be there to help out, working with the executive committee, CEO, CFO, chief technology officer, and then just have somebody else serve as incident commander.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Do you have any alternative communication channels set up for the CSIRT in case the regular ones are down?
Absolutely. There are actually some cloud-based that are really coming along. You can use, I've even said, I talk about in some of the training I've done is, incident commanders should have an impact card with about $10,000 at play for an incident. They may have to be able to just spin up Zoom, a commercial Zoom channel outside of the normal enterprise. Signal. You may just want to, there are other platforms, for example, Cygnus, but with a Y. They're a cloud-based incident management platform. It is commercial. It does run you a little bit of cash, but and you see what they have is internal comms right there, so you can spin that up and have it at your disposal, and it is completely outside of your enterprise. So there's a lot of, and this is again one of those things you might want to plan for is, hey, what is our primary comms and what is our secondary comms?
Awesome. Thank you, man. All right. I love this question. Can you give any advice for folks who may be interested in pivoting into an incident response role? How much technical experience would you say is beneficial to have?
What I would say is if you're looking to be a leader or you're just looking at kind of taking the incident command, it's about a 60-40 split. You want to have a good understanding of some of the project management skills. operational and strategic incident response, but understand some of the forensics. And that maybe taking some training on common forensic techniques. You don't necessarily need to be a full malware analyst, but understand what the malware analyst is going to kick back to you and what it means. A lot of times people look at this and say, I need to be, an expert in memory analysis, malware analysis, network forensics. No, what you need to understand is what is the impact? What does this mean in the global context? So have some background in forensics, but also have some background in security operations, because a lot of it is we get these IOCs, and then what do we do is we don't have a mechanism to dump them into, say, detective control. So understand, say, maybe how an EDR platform works as well.
How important would you say like soft skills, communication skills are in incident response?
If you are the incident commander or incident lead, those soft skills really do definitely play in how well you can answer questions on your feet. One of the other things is during the planning process, you have to sweet talk a lot of people to give up some time to be part of that process. This is one of the aspects to the preparation is, hey, we're going to have to do this, meaning shut your apps off. If you're talking to the DevOps or the CI/CD teams or something like that, or even just finance, and say, we're going to have to ever have an incident, make that known. And you also have to be looking at this from their perspective. So a little bit of emotional intelligence to understand their perspective, and ability to communicate is critical, especially as you're starting to build out. Obviously, we want these discussions to happen beforehand, but if you had to, something to be aware of.
Thank you, sir. How much time do you have? Because we have a lot of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I got more than enough time right now.
Yeah, cool. What sort of mindset or certifications would you look for in hiring an incident commander?
The easiest way to kind of get started this from certifications is FEMA ICS 100-700. This is free training, and it gives you a foundation in incident management. One of the things to also think about, there's some training materials out there. A lot of it, as I said, is government. From a certification standpoint, if you've got CISSP and project management help in, the CISM, and this is kind of I'm going to kind of editorialize, one of my little bit of a complaints is you have to have management experience, but even just reading through the CISM incident management material is also really good. If you have familiar with something like ITIL, any one of those frameworks is really good. A good solid foundation in the incident response material that, say, NIST puts out. There's very little in terms of certification, like certified incident commander. What I would say is, if you want to do this job, look at starting in security operations in an IR team, and then look for the leadership roles where you can actually start to apply this. The way to stand out is pre-planning as much as you can and pre-thinking a lot of this stuff out.
What kind of metrics are measured when an incident happens?
One of the things I like to look at is what's your time at different stages. The primary metric from an incident management perspective is how much time it takes you to get from 1 to 2 to 2 to 3 to 3 to 4. And whether or not you were able to do that, if you had to keep going back and forth. So let's take a look at a specific metric that might be of use. Is that escalation to call out to initial analysis? We want to look at what that time looks like. And if you're hitting in that, if I will tell you, if your security operations escalates and you are starting to pull evidence within 60 minutes, that is a great metric. That is fantastic. And if you're sitting here at 4 hours and you're able to pull data and start to go through it and start extracting IOCs in 4 hours, that's an awesome metric. So time is really our metric here, because there's a whole host of factors, type of incident, time of day, that really pull into that. But as I said, those SLOs, those objectives in terms of time, that's a really good metric to measure how effective your team is. The other is how much time it takes for the security operations to get from an alert to where they're escalating it. So a lot of it is hitting those time pieces across the incident management. And then to really look at this could be a training issue, is we just don't know what to go look for. And it took us an extra 2 hours versus, we knew exactly what tool to pull. We knew, run it through CAPE. We dug through the CSVs. We found the execution. So really the major metric from an incident management perspective is time.
What are the most effective containment strategies for different types of cyber incidents, such as ransomware attacks versus data breaches?
So the most effective is if you can get the closest to the impacted side of the enterprise. So so what do I mean by that is if you have a enterprise-wide, meaning every LAN segment is ransomwared, you are probably most likely going to have to go all the way out to the perimeter and block everything at the perimeter. But the obvious impact is we are going to have to go through and as I said, that's an AZ5 moment. You may just cut internet connectivity until you can get the situation under control and start working backwards where you identify the specific IP addresses or domains. If it's localized, say it's a LAN segment, your containment strategy may be we're going to down that LAN segment. The rest of the network will work, but what you've done is minimize the impact and then start what I call the Russian nesting doll. Is if you are not particularly clued into what they're using and how they're command and control, you may start out with the perimeter, down the perimeter, and then start working your way backwards. And then look at what the containment strategy is from a network perspective. Other thing is look at credentials. Lateral movement, which is a key component of that data theft, for example, you need to understand what credentials they're using. Because if they pop a box in, say, marketing, and what they're looking for, they don't need they can't really use the marketing individuals if you have properly architected and maintained network. The marketing doesn't have user administrative access to their system. They're looking for that administrator account. If they get that administrator account, that's another part of lateral movement that you need to find, is what are they using for that lateral movement piece? If they're using PSExec or they're using RDP, whatever the case may be. So your overall strategy is identify the layer 2, layer 3, and then potentially what the credentials are, and then work from there. You may stop command and control just by simply shutting off their access to the Cobalt Strike infrastructure and that user account that they're using.
Will some of the info that you covered today in this webcast be in your main class?
Yes, we go into a lot of depth on all of these topics. Plus, we focus a lot more on the preparation side of what we need to do from a preparation standpoint.
Awesome. I'll grab the link for your class too here in a second. What are some of the tools that an incident manager needs to know how to use to run an incident?
Okay, this is going to sound trite. PowerPoint. Can you fire up a PowerPoint slide very quickly? One of the things I include, and if anybody wants to get a copy, just hit me up. I have an actual slide deck that I've created, pulled from other slide decks to basically give a briefing slide. It's cut and paste as you need. If you have some sort of communications platform, sharing platform, in the course, for example, we use D4Iris as kind of our orchestration platform. So you may need to pull in something like that. Hive, I think Demisto is still around that SOAR capability. I know Sentinel, Microsoft Sentinel has playbooks and SOAR capabilities in there. So those kind of platforms as well, if you can. There's a lot of heavy lifting initially, but something to think about in terms of that. There's a lot of different free and open source platforms that'll support that kind of incident management SOAR capability with playbooks, those kind of things.
Thank you, sir. How do you define and prioritize TTX scenarios?
I look at maturity. So if I'm coming at this from an outside, I look at an organization's maturity. So what I'll start to do is work on some basic, start with basic. What is our containment strategy for command and control? What is our eradication recovery if we have X amount of compromised systems? I don't want to necessarily hammer them right off the bat with a domain controller compromise where every credential is compromised, because they would just overload them. Think also not about the specific elements of the exercise, but look at those three core areas: technical, intra-team, inter-team. Understand how those things work. And if an organization is doing really well intra-team and inter-team, then you can dial it up to 11 and say, I'm going to make this a horrific scenario where we've not only got blown out domain controller, they've taken every research and development document out. They've also exfilled the customer database. So now you got to go customer notifications. You got to notify the SEC. You got to notify these regulators. You got lawyers. So the TTXs are valuable, but you need to kind of gauge where the organization is from a maturity level and make sure you're not overloading them very quickly. If you overload them, they'll just kind of go into the fetal position and start crying. So that's the best way to prioritize, is look at the maturity, start slow. And then there are ones that I've run. I've come in 2 or 3 years in a row to an organization every year. And I've told them, I'm like, this is going to hurt. This is like going to the gym, and it is a heavy leg day.
Awesome. Will Velociraptor capture disk images?
I believe, that's a good question. I'm going to say there is some, I don't know. I want to say that it does. I haven't done that because I find that you get everything through the basic collection package. What it will do though is you can go through the file structure. I'll have to double check on that. Probably somebody else could answer that. Give you a confirmation. I'm like 80% sure that it does support some of that. It does. What I will say though, what Velociraptor will do outside of that really kind of makes it a really good tool is a lot of the extensibility with Yara, other tools that integrate with it. So.
Is there a tool available to guide an analyst or the SOC at large through all the decisions they have to make?
So one of the things to look at are SOAR tools. As I said, D4Iris is one that we use in the 2-day class because what you can do is build your own playbooks fairly easily, imported in a JSON, and it gives you all of the steps to work through. You can assign tasks, you can track completion, you can track evidence, all of that. So that is a decent tool that I found. It's not too complicated. You can get it full up. But that is D4Iris is a really good one. There are some other SOAR platforms that do this. A lot of organizations are moving away from this kind of swim lane Visio diagram of our playbooks and plans and moving more into something like D4Iris or other SOAR platforms where they don't have this Visio diagram, because honestly, and I'm glad we're moving away from it. They were often tough to follow. They were often the last thing to get updated, and they were often out of date. So some of those SOAR tools, look for SOAR tools. As I said, D4Iris, so DFIR -Iris is a good tool to use.
Thank you, sir. This is a good question for both you, Jerry, and Jordan, potentially. But this person is interested in relocating to Western South Dakota. Is the IT sector growing in Rapid City and other areas of Western South Dakota?
I wouldn't say it's been as rapid as there's a pun there. Rapid as I've seen it in other areas. I know there's a lot more that say the Dakota School of Mines are really working to keep people here. There are some tech companies. What I would say is that there's a lot of room out here, and decent sized airport that's growing. So if you can find a remote gig and you want to move out here, Obviously Black Hills Information Security is right up the road. I really came here more for the scenery and the room versus that, because I work remotely. But it's going through some growth that may not be as rapid as a lot of people are thinking.
Thank you, sir. How involved should an incident commander be in investigation or threat hunting tasks rather than executive briefings?
It depends on the incident. This is kind of the player coach modality, and that is basically where a incident commander, and I've done this on incidents where there was a large analysis piece, but not much of a crisis. So more of, if I didn't have to work through understanding containment. So let's say one of them in particular, I can remember, we roll in and it started out as a crisis. By the time I got to the airport, got from the airport to the customer site, they were like, whoa, we got it contained. It impacted only six systems. And there were 2 analysts there. And I said, well, if it's only 6 systems, we're pulling everything from 6 of the systems, and I'll lend a hand in there. Most of the time, no, if it is a crisis, you are going to be brokering conversations back and forth, working with the analysts. So you may get your hands dirty on some incidents, but most of the more larger crisis-driven ones, you're gonna basically be working with all of the different teams outside of the technical that have their hands in it.
All right, I just have a couple more questions left. Should the CSIRT report to the FBI if it's a nation state actor?
That is up to you how you want to do it. I will be honest. Law enforcement is often not prepared to really assist you in any way. What they may do is, if there's information sharing agreements, if you're part of InfraGard, or if you're part of what I would say is if you are in a fairly good sized metropolitan area in the United States, Boston, New York, Austin, reach out to the FBI and see if they have a cyber agent there. You can buy them a cup of coffee. You can't buy them anything really expensive, but you can take them out for coffee and say, hey, what's our process here? Because most of the time they're involved in aggregating your situation, your incident with other incidents, putting it together, and then trying to see if they can get an indictment. Oftentimes they're not situated to parachute in and deal with that. So it's up to you. I've done it where you just notify the FBI. If it's a nation state, if you think this is an APT style, you may have to report it to them and then take their direction. But oftentimes, if it's a ransomware, they'll take your IOCs and say thank you very much and include it with other ones.
Awesome. That's actually all the questions that we have, sir.
Okay.
Awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to be here
Yes.
with us, share your knowledge with everybody, and of course take the time to answer questions with everybody as well. It was a great time today.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, and for participating. And the questions were awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And I got about another 15 minutes or so here left. So after all of these webcasts that we do, we invite you to join us in our breakout room. So if you have the Zoom application installed on your device, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little button that says, maybe it'll say more, maybe it'll say breakout rooms. But under there, there's a breakout room that you can join. If you have any questions for us at Antisyphon Training, or any questions about cybersecurity in general or your learning journey, please join us in that breakout room. I'll be joining you there in just a second, and I'll answer any questions that you guys have. But until next time, until next week, we will see you then. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you soon. Thank you again, Jerry and Jordan, for being
Thank
here.
you.
Appreciate you guys. Join the breakout room right now.